Welcome to Real Health with me, Karl Henry. Folks, on today's podcast, we are joined by Martina Blake, National Lead for the HSE Tobacco Free Ireland programme. Vaping is increasingly common, especially and worryingly amongst young people. And while it's often seen as a safer alternative to smoking, there are real concerns around nicotine addiction, lung health, mental well-being and regulation. In this episode, we explore what vaping actually is, how it affects the body, what we know, what we don't know, about the long-term risks and the supports available for people who want to quit. Martina, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to this topic.
Great.
I think it's really important.
Yeah, I suppose it's a topic that a lot of people are interested in because we've seen a huge growth in the number of both adults and particularly young people who are vaping. And I suppose, I work in Tobacco Free Ireland, so our work is around, reducing smoking prevalence. But the phenomenon of vaping has hampered and stalled our progress in terms of achieving a tobacco-free Ireland. So the HRB, the Health Research Board, did a study a number of years ago and looked at whether or not e-cigarettes were helpful in smoking cessation and what impact they had in terms of smoking initiation. And they found that young people who started to vape were 3 to 5 times more likely to go on to smoke later in life.
Wow.
Yeah. And they obviously looked at the harms versus benefits of e-cigarettes as well. So we looked at them before we made these new clinical guidelines and recommendations around what works in terms of stop smoking care. And some of the studies showed that e-cigarettes were helping some people to quit smoking, but at a population level, they haven't helped. So they've stalled our smoking prevalence rates, and they're also harmful in and of themselves. And we could talk a little bit more about that specifically. So we decided not to recommend them as a stop smoking aid in our clinical guidelines because we had 2 products. We had nicotine replacement therapy, which we know is licensed medicine that's safe and has, decades of trials. And we had e-cigarettes on the other hand, which had some small number of studies that said that they might be effective, but they were harmful in and of themselves. And then there was the risk of youth use, which we have seen. Yeah.
And when did vaping start? When did it come in? Because it's everywhere now.
It's pretty much everywhere now. So I suppose the real growth started kind of 2015, 2016 here. But, it was invented in China a number of years before that as a stop smoking aid, actually, by a scientist over there. But I suppose the real growth has happened in the last 9 to 10 years. The tobacco industry have purchased the vape industry, the companies that produce vapes and are very interested in this space because they can see the move away from tobacco. People are interested in their health a bit more, a bit more aware of the harms of smoking. And they're, the tobacco industry are interested in profit, obviously, and, targeting the next generation of children for the next new thing. So, most of the industry is controlled by the tobacco industry. So they're producing loads of different types of products. There's even new products to provide nicotine, like nicotine gummy sweets, nicotine gel, that you can put on your skin, nicotine toothpicks, nicotine pouches and vapes. So they're diversifying.
And specifically around vapes, what exactly is it for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah. So basically you're heating, chemicals, you're heating e-liquid, and in the e-liquid you have ingredients like you have ingredients like formaldehyde, you have ingredients like propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, benzene, toluene, and, flavourings. And you're heating those to a high temperature and you're producing an aerosol. So people think it's a vapour, and it's called vaping, like vapour, as if it was, the steam from the end of a kettle, for example. But it's actually an aerosol. Like you would get in, a tin of deodorant or something.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's an aerosol. You're inhaling it deep into the lungs. There's, chemicals within it, fine particles, and nicotine, the key ingredients, which keeps people coming back. And the flavours are what's very attractive for young people. So they're coming like thousands of different flavors, cherry cola, lime, crush, whatever, loads and loads of flavors. And it's more palatable than smoking, obviously, for young people, so they keep coming back to it. So you're inhaling that, and you're getting nicotine, and initially you're getting that buzz from nicotine.
So you're getting the nicotine hit from the vape.
Yeah, you're getting that nicotine hit, and then you can get addicted, pretty quickly after a couple of days of regular use, and then you kind of, once you're addicted, your body adapts to nicotine. You need more of it. You produce nicotine receptors in your brain, and then when you get nicotine, you release feel good hormones in your brain.
Okay, it's an endorphin releaser.
Yes,
wow.
It's an endorphin releaser, and then your body gets used to that level of endorphin. And you need that in order to feel normal, if you understand what I mean.
So it's no surprise that people become addicted to it.
Oh, absolutely. No surprise at all. Really highly addictive. In fact, the WHO would suggest that nicotine is even more addictive than heroin.
Wow.
Yeah. So really, really addictive. And a lot of kids are experimenting, with vapes, and it tastes like strawberry, and it tastes quite nice, and they don't think that there's any harm in it because they don't understand nicotine, they don't understand nicotine addiction, they don't understand that this could be a lifelong addiction. And for a lot of people who have smoked, it is a lifelong addiction. Like we have people who contact our quit services who might have quit smoking 30 years ago. Something happened in their lives, and they end up maybe at a party or after a bereavement or something, and trying an odd cigarette again. They get the nicotine again into their system, their brain remembers, and within a week they're back smoking.
And is it fair to presume that because like a cigarette is finite, that when it's finished you can go on to the next one, but like it's finished?
That's right.
But with the vape, until the cartridge is empty, you can just continually vape.
Yeah.
So
what we're seeing is kind of higher levels of addiction. Wow. Because you can vape more regularly. There's less restrictions. There's no legal rule around vaping indoors.
And what's the age for sale of vapes? What's the age limit?
So you have to be, there is an age limit now. It only came in though in December 2023, so a very short time ago. Before that, a child could go in and purchase a vape. There was nothing prohibiting the sale of vapes to children, and the sale of snus is still legal now. I know the government are making moves to bring in legislation around the sale of snus, which is nicotine pouches, which I can talk a little bit about. Yeah.
Okay.
But that at the moment is illegal to sell to a child. So we have brought legislation back to vaping. I suppose we have brought legislation in to prohibit the sale to children, but and we do have environmental health staff who go in and inspect, retailers who sell vapes, and they check for various things. So they check for sales of tobacco, they check for sales of vapes, and they do test purchasing, which is kind of like a secret shopper. They bring in.
And is the age now what, 16, 18?
No, it's 18.
18.
It's 18, yeah. But actually, when they have done, so we test and, monitor this legislation, but compliance is a challenge, and that's the risk as well. And we don't have enough environmental health staff to really kind of get into every single place. So one number that I would like to plug, that if you're a parent or even a young person or just a concerned adult in the community, and a retailer that is selling to children, you can ring the compliance line, and that's 1-800-333-100, or email info.ntco, the National Tobacco Control Office, info.ntco@hse.ie, that email address, and report the retailer, and they will go out and investigate that. And
or you could go to the guards, I presume, could you?
No, the tobacco and e-cigarette legislation is monitored by health service and environmental health service. Yeah, not the guards. Yeah.
Wow. Every day is a school day.
Every day is a school day.
I tell you.
Sure.
Okay, so now we're all spooked. I'm certainly frightened. Tell me more about vaping and the impacts for someone who uses it regularly, the impacts on the body.
Yeah, so obviously there's physical impacts and there's mental health impacts. So, for in terms of physical impact, so when you're inhaling, a vapor, obviously you're inhaling it deep down into the lungs, so there's risk to your lungs, damage to your lungs. And people who vape regularly increase their risk of asthma, bronchitis, lung damage, permanent lung damage actually. So that's obviously a risk. Nicotine in high doses in and of itself makes your blood cells more sticky. So it increases your blood pressure. So it increases your risk of heart disease, increases your risk of stroke and blood pressure. So the risk is nicotine addiction, lung and heart effects from a physical health point of view. From a mental health point of view, nicotine addiction affects your sleep, affects your mood, your anxiety levels can be increased when you become addicted, because when you become addicted, you're cycling through highs and lows of nicotine constantly, all day long. So, you vape for a little while, you feel normal, for want of a better word. After a couple of hours of not vaping or not smoking, your nicotine levels drop, you're starting to feel anxious, irritable, and you're getting those kind of symptoms. You vape again, you start to feel normal, in inverted commas, so you're cycling through that constantly, and it affects your sleep as well.
Is passive vaping a problem? The way passive smoking is a problem? Yeah.
So there's less evidence and research about that. But, we know that vapor in and of itself, not vapor, but the aerosol that you breathe in is harmful. And so passive aerosol is potentially harmful, probably less so. But evidence is only emerging on that.
It's that time where you walk down the street.
Yeah, and you're standing behind somebody.
Between here and Houston Station, after I record the podcast, I inevitably walk through vape in some way, shape or form.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So anything that you're inhaling into your lungs that's not oxygen is
a problem.
Is not good. Yeah.
Chat to me the effects of long-term vaping. Do we know what the effects are or potential effects are?
So the long-term health effects are less well known as well, because it's so new. So it will take decades to really understand, what the harms are. I mean, there are cancer-causing chemicals within e-cigarettes, but to get a cause and effect just yet, you'll take decades of research to demonstrate that. But, there are chemicals, there's nickel, lead, cadmium, and also, some of the flavourings. So say propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, they're kind of flavourings, synthetic flavourings that you might find in food stuff, for example. And in and of itself, that's harmless. But when you heat it, you change the chemistry of it, and it changes into acrolein and formaldehyde. Wow. And that's the challenge. So that's weed killer, essentially. You know what I mean? So, so the chemicals, change on when you heat it, and when you inhale it deep into your lungs, it's not good.
For anyone listening in who vapes and wants to quit, let's talk through the process of that.
Yeah, so...
Are there any supports within the HSE?
Yeah, so we don't have like a formal stop vaping service at the moment, because we haven't been... because we haven't been funded by the department to do so. But what we have, I suppose, is we do have our staff who deliver stop smoking care, and we have our quit line. And so where we have capacity, we do provide behavioural support. Okay. And that behavioural support consists of 9 different appointments over a 12-month period.
Oh yeah, it's quit.ie, is it?
It's quit.ie,
brilliant. Yeah. It's an amazing. We've had so many people through that. It's fabulous.
Oh, wonderful.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So it's a really good service. So, you can call the quit line 1-800-201-203, free phone number, make an appointment, and they'll help you to get your head in the right space. Prepare for your quit date, look at your triggers, they'll tell you things, tips and tricks like, writing down what you like or what you enjoy about vaping or smoking, what you don't like, assessing your motivation, assessing your nicotine addiction level, getting you to set a definite quit date, and then planning for what you're going to do instead after that quit date, planning for your triggers. For some people, they associate smoking or vaping with different patterns and routines throughout the day. You know, get up in the morning, have the coffee or whatever. So we ask clients to think about different ways of managing those after their quit date. So we have that behavioural support when we have capacity, when we don't have too many smokers looking for our service. We have our website, which has a lot of content on there as well. So if you Google, or we'll share some of the pages as well on this, you can how to quit vaping. We have some content on that, and that'll give you some tips and tricks.
And is that better than going, say, cold turkey? So listening to the episode, I'm going to stop today.
Yeah, so we really encourage you to think about quitting. But when we say cold turkey, we're talking about medication and using medication. So what we don't have just yet is publicly funded stop vaping medication. So we have publicly funded stop smoking medication because we got approval for that. We have the evidence base behind it.
They're the patches.
Yeah, so the nicotine patches, NRT we call it, nicotine replacement therapy. So nicotine patches, the mouth spray, the lozenge, the gum. So we have those medicines for people who smoke only or people who dual use. So people who smoke and vape, they can access those for free. But we don't have publicly funded medicines for people who vape only just yet. And there are some challenges around that because some of those medicines aren't licensed for that yet. So we're doing some research around what works. There's some trials going on in Canada and various other countries researching best practice into stop vaping care. But for now, what we offer is behavioural support, and people can self-fund nicotine replacement. So we advise that they go into their chemist, think about and consider nicotine replacement, but they would have to self-fund that, unfortunately, for vaping just now.
Okay. And chat to me about some of the products that you brought in. I was looking at them here on the table.
Yeah. So I just brought in a couple of different products. So some of these are the snus. So technically, I suppose snus in the true sense of the word is a tobacco nicotine product, a tobacco product containing.
When you
nicotine.
say it, what comes to mind is watching cowboy and western movies, and they're putting the stuff in their mouth and they're going,
kind of oral tobacco. Yeah. So that's kind of what snus really is. I suppose it's a nicotine kind of product that you put into your mouth, and common in Sweden and common in some of the Nordic countries. But the products, so we have that prohibited and banned in Ireland through legislation. So we don't see too much pure tobacco snus in Ireland. What we are seeing is this white snus, we call it.
Okay, and for folks listening in, Martina is holding the snus in her hands. You can catch that on our YouTube episode if you want. But basically, she's taking the packet. Looks like chewing gum.
Looks like chewing gum, tiny little white pouch. Inside the pouch is synthetic nicotine salts, flavourings, chemicals. It's like a little powder. You pop it between your gum and your lip and you let it sit, and it releases nicotine. And this is kind of a very vascular area. Yeah, so...
and of course, it's so rapidly absorbed, like a carbo gel or whatever,
Yeah, rapidly absorbed. Within a few minutes, you'll start to feel a tingling kind of sensation. You might feel a bit nauseated because high doses of nicotine very early, can cause you to feel a little bit nauseated until your body gets used to it. And the kids have a term for this. They call it nick sick, when you're first starting to use.
And what worries me about those is that they're available.
They're available.
Anyone of any age.
If you watch out after listening to this, just take a little bit more, observe a little bit more when you go into the shop. When you go into your Spar, your Sentry or whatever, you'll see them sometimes on the countertop, right in front of you. Yeah, sometimes on the countertop.
They're available in
right behind you.
Like retail, like Spar, Sentry, whatever.
Spar, Sentry.
No way.
Everywhere, yeah. You probably just haven't noticed because you're not looking for it. But they're available and they're really heavily promoted. So they are providing even the space, and the company is providing the space and the advertising behind for all the products. They're available in all the colours, very attractive. If you go online, you're encouraged to buy 2 or 3 products together and get a discount. And they have this are you 18 kind of thing, but there's no verification of
it. Tick the box.
Yeah, tick the box. And some of them will send you out free samples. I was googling there today, and you can just
get you hooked.
Get your free sample.
Wow. It's kind of scary.
It is a bit
I'm glad
scary.
we had you in. I'm kind of slightly scared now, but in the same boat, I think this is the beauty of having a platform like this, which is the fact that we can make
just
people
to be a bit
aware,
more
we
aware.
can talk people out, and if people have concerns or they want to do a bit of googling and to get help, websites.
Yeah, so go on to quit.ie and you'll find, if you search around there, you'll find information on vaping and quitting vaping, or if you just Google, vaping cessation or quitting vaping or something like that, or HSE, you'll get onto our pages. And, as I said, if you want to report a store, email in info.ntco@hse.ie or phone that number. That's what I would suggest for people. Google up, get informed yourself about this area, particularly if you're a parent of a young person. It's really common among young people. Like the evidence is telling us that the figures, are quite high, like 1 in 5 young people, 15 to 16-year-olds. Yeah, so 20%. You know what I mean? So, like if you're sitting in a classroom, say, for example, as a teacher, do you know what I mean? The odds are that you have a significant number of kids vaping in your class. And, snus use is becoming more popular as well, and particularly for young people because it's more discreet. They might get caught vaping in the school,
Worse,
but less likely to get caught with the snus. So that's the challenge. Yeah.
Okay, folks, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Real Health with me, Karl Henry. Martina, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate that. A really important episode, I think, and we'll put some of the websites in the show notes as well for people listening in. As ever, you know where we are, at Karl Henry PT on Instagram, Real Health Independent.ie, and on the Irish Independent website. An important episode. Listen, share, talk about it. The more we get the word out around the products that we have here in front of us that we've talked about, the better. So it's a really important week, and we'll see you next week. Slán go fóill.